Ready to have your mind blown? We're going to look at some classic religious stories, but like you've never seen them before.
Sounds intriguing.
You bet. We've got these excerpts you found titled Pasted Text.
Right.
And it's all about how the Baha'i faith reinterprets these stories.
Yeah.
You know, Adam and Eve, heaven, hell, even the Tower of Babel. We're dishing the literal interpretations.
Okay.
Uncovering some seriously deep symbolism.
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. It's going to be fun. So most people take these stories at face value, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
But the Baha'i faith is like, hold on, there's way more to it than that.
Exactly. They offer a total different perspective.
One that really makes you think. And it resonates with a lot of people today.
It does. It's like it speaks to a deeper understanding of these ancient texts.
Okay, so let's start with Adam and Eve. Everyone knows the story, right? Forbidden fruit, the serpent, the whole shebang.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that's just ingrained in our culture.
Totally. So what's the typical interpretation that most folks are familiar with?
Well, usually it's seen as the origin of sin.
Ah, yes, original sin.
Right, the fall of humanity.
Yeah.
You know, Adam and Eve disobeyed God, and we've been paying the price ever since.
Yeah, heavy stuff. But the Baha'i faith kind of flips that whole idea on its head, right?
They do. Instead of this literal fall from grace, they see it as a symbolic representation of humanity's transition.
Transition from what?
From a state of innocence to like an awareness of the material world and its temptations.
Okay, so instead of focusing on disobedience and punishment,
right,
it's more about gaining knowledge and then all the challenges that come with that.
Exactly. It's like humanity coming of age.
Makes sense. Like think about a kid who starts to realize they have desires,
right,
preferences. They got to make choices.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
It's not. And that's what the Adam and Eve story symbolizes on a grander scale.
We're all going through that process.
We are.
Figuring out how to deal with our wants and needs.
Absolutely.
Okay, but what about that sneaky serpent? Is that where Satan comes in?
Not quite. In the Baha'i view, the serpent isn't some outside devil figure.
Oh, really?
It's more internal. It represents our lower self.
Our lower self.
Yeah, you know, the ego, those selfish desires that we all struggle with.
Oh, so like that little voice inside us that's like, eat the whole bag of chips, you deserve it.
Exactly. Even though we know we'll regret it later.
Oh, meowing that voice well.
We all do. It's part of being human.
So it's not about blaming some outside force
right,
for our mistakes.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for those inner struggles.
That's the key takeaway here. It's about recognizing that battle within ourselves.
Between our better angels and those less than angelic impulses.
You got it.
So no devil, no original sin. Where does that leave the whole heaven and hell thing?
That's where things get really interesting. The Baha'i faith doesn't see heaven and hell as physical places.
Hold on, so no pearly gates or fiery pits?
No, they're seen as states of the soul.
States of the soul. Okay, hear more about this.
So heaven in this interpretation represents closeness to God.
Closeness to God.
Right, a state of spiritual fulfillment and joy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing hell would be the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
It's that feeling of separation from the divine.
Disconnected, lost.
Right, a condition brought about by our own choices and attachments to worldly things.
It's like we're creating our own heaven or hell based on how we're living.
In a way, yes. There's a powerful passage in the Kitab-i-Quran, one of the central Baha'i texts.
Okay.
And it describes hell as a condition of neglect and distance from God.
Wow, that's heavy. It's not about some external punishment.
No.
But the inner turmoil we experience when we're not aligned with our true selves.
Exactly.
I've definitely felt that way before.
Yeah.
Like when I'm disconnected from my purpose or my values, it's not a fun place to be.
I think we all have those moments.
We do. It's part of being human, but recognizing it as a state of being.
Right.
Rather than a physical place. It's kind of empowering.
It is. It means we have the power to change those states.
Right, we're not stuck there.
Yeah.
So if it's all about our choices and our inner state, what happens to Satan in this whole picture?
Well, the Baha'i teachings take a similar approach to Satan as they do to the serpent.
Okay, so it's not like a literal being.
Right. It's not some external entity with horns and a pitchfork.
So what is it?
It's more symbolic. It represents those negative tendencies within us.
Those negative tendencies.
Yeah, you know, the ego, pride, selfishness, all those things that can lead us astray.
So we're back to that idea of taking responsibility for our own darkness.
Exactly. It's a powerful shift in thinking.
It is. Instead of blaming an outside force for evil,
right,
we're being challenged to confront those darker impulses within ourselves and work towards spiritual growth.
That's the heart of it.
Okay, that makes sense. But it brings up another question. If heaven and hell aren't actual places, then what about Judgment Day? How does that fit in?
That's a fascinating one. The Baha'i understanding of Judgment Day is not a one-time event at the end of time.
Oh, really?
It's seen as a continuous process of self-reflection.
Self-reflection.
Yeah, happening throughout our lives.
So every moment, every choice is like a mini Judgment Day.
In a sense, yes. It's about constantly evaluating our actions and aligning ourselves with our higher purpose.
Okay, so no pressure or anything.
It's more about awareness and intentionality.
I like it. It's a good reminder to be mindful of our choices and how they're shaping our journey.
Exactly.
Speaking of journeys, our next story is about one that didn't go quite as planned.
Oh.
We're talking about the Tower of Babel.
Ah, yes, the story of human ambition and miscommunication.
Exactly. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the Tower of Babel was this massive structure that humanity decided to build so high they thought it would reach the heavens.
Quite ambitious.
Yeah, well, God wasn't too thrilled about this display of, shall we say, overconfidence.
And decided to intervene.
You bet. By confusing everyone's language.
And that's how we ended up with so many different languages according to the story.
Right. But of course, the Baha'i faith has a more symbolic interpretation of this as well, doesn't it?
It does. It sees the Tower of Babel as a powerful metaphor for human pride and disunity.
Pride and disunity.
Yeah, the confusion of languages represents how we separate ourselves from each other and from God.
When we let our egos get in the way.
Exactly, when self-interest takes over.
It's like we're all trying to build our own little towers, focused on our individual goals and forgetting about the bigger picture.
And the result is a world filled with misunderstanding, conflict, and division.
So the Tower of Babel isn't just an ancient story. It's a reflection of the challenges we're facing right now.
Absolutely. All the polarization and division in the world.
It's a cautionary tale for our times.
Very much so. It reminds us that despite our differences, we're all part of one human family.
And recognizing our interconnectedness is essential for building a better world.
Couldn't agree more.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already. From Adam and Eve to heaven and hell to the Tower of Babel.
We have.
And we've seen how the Baha'i faith reinterprets these classic religious stories.
Offering deeper layers of meaning.
That are still relevant today.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
That's right. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll delve even further into these fascinating Baha'i interpretations.
Picking up where we left off, it's really fascinating how these Baha'i interpretations change how we think about good and evil.
Yeah, totally.
We're so used to this idea of the devil, right? Or some outside force that tempts us. But to say that the real Satan is our own ego, our own selfish desires, that's a whole new way of looking at it.
It is. It's like all the responsibility falls on us.
Right.
No more blaming some external force for our bad choices.
You own it.
But doesn't that also make it harder?
Harder how?
I mean, if it's all internal, how can we hold people accountable for their actions?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what the Baha'i teachings say about free will and personal responsibility.
Okay.
So yes, we all have these negative tendencies within us.
Right, the serpent.
Exactly. But we also have the capacity for reason, for compassion, for making choices that align with our higher selves.
So it's like this constant back and forth.
In a way, yes.
We're always navigating between those two forces.
You got it.
The serpent and our higher aspiration.
And that's where spiritual growth comes in.
Okay, how so?
It's about becoming more aware of those forces, making conscious choices, striving to overcome those negative impulses.
It's a lifelong process.
It is. It's a journey, not a destination.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's definitely a journey I'm still figuring out. But hey, at least we have the power to choose right.
Exactly. You shape your own spiritual path.
Which brings us back to heaven and hell as states of being. If we're always making choices, always evaluating our actions, we're essentially creating our own heaven or hell every single day.
That's a powerful way to think about it.
It is. No waiting around for some final judgment. It's about living in a state of awareness and striving for that closeness to God, that spiritual fulfillment in every moment.
And that applies to how we treat others too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If we can remember that everyone is on their own spiritual journey, battling their own internal serpent, it can help us be more understanding, more compassionate.
It's like we're all in this together.
We are.
Trying to build our own personal heaven while navigating all the ups and downs of being human.
It's a shared experience.
And that shared humanity, that interconnectedness, that's what we need to remember to overcome the divisions symbolized by the Tower of Babel.
Absolutely. We need to tear down those walls, start communicating, collaborating, recognizing that we're all ultimately striving for the same thing.
A world where unity and understanding win out.
A world where love and compassion guide our actions.
And that's where these Baha'i interpretations come in. They offer a framework for understanding not just our individual spiritual journeys,
Right.
but the challenges facing humanity as a whole.
It's a new lens through which to view the world.
That encourages us to look deeper, to find meaning, to connect with those universal truths that go beyond time and culture.
And that's what makes these teachings so relevant today.
Especially in a world that feels so divided and chaotic.
They offer a path toward unity, toward understanding, toward a better future.
It's a path I'm definitely interested in exploring further. What about you?
Absolutely. It's made me think about my own assumptions.
Yeah, me too.
And how I can live these principles of unity, compassion, personal responsibility.
It's all about putting these ideas into practice.
It is.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. They challenge us to think differently, to engage with these ancient teachings in a new way.
And to discover how they can still guide us today.
In the 21st century and beyond. You know, it's amazing how these Baha'i interpretations can breathe new life into these stories.
They really do. It's like they're speaking to us across time and cultures.
Exactly. Like suddenly these ancient tales feel so relevant to our lives today.
It all comes down to the power of symbolism.
Symbolism.
Yeah, it's not about taking everything literally.
Right.
It's about recognizing those deeper layers of meaning.
The stuff that connects with our shared human experience.
Precisely. It makes you wonder if we could apply this kind of thinking to other stories too.
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
Like, imagine looking at ancient myths or legends or even fairy tales through this symbolic lens.
Yeah, suddenly they become so much more than just stories.
They become sources of wisdom and guidance.
Helping us navigate all the complexities of life.
It's like we're uncovering hidden treasures.
Unlocking those timeless truths that have been passed down through generations.
And that's something we really need today.
What do you mean?
Well, in a world that's often so superficial, this kind of depth and nuance is incredibly valuable.
It is. It's a reminder to slow down, to look beyond the surface, to really engage with these stories on a deeper level.
And that's exactly what these Baha'i interpretations have done for us.
They really have. They've challenged us to think differently.
To question our assumptions.
To see these familiar stories in a whole new light.
And ultimately to connect with those universal truths that connect us all.
Truths about the human condition.
About our spiritual journey.
About the power of unity and compassion.
And the importance of striving for a better world.
A world where love and understanding prevail.
Where we recognize our interconnectedness.
And where we work together to build a future that reflects those higher ideals.
That's a vision worth striving for.
It is. Well, listeners, we've come to the end of our deep dive into these fascinating Baha'i interpretations.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
We hope this has sparked your curiosity.
And inspired you to see these classic stories in a new light.
Remember, the most profound truths are often hidden beneath the surface.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper meanings.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep diving deep.